Hey everyone, welcome to the Got 10 Minutes podcast, the podcast for product teams brought to you by Samelogic.com, the social product development network to get amazing ideas from anyone and anywhere. Today we speak with Chuck Moore, who is the Chief Design Officer at DesignMap. Hey Chuck, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much. Happy to be here.
Awesome, great to have you. So Chuck, as a chief design officer at DesignMap, you've been instrumental in driving design innovation and creating impactful products, right? Before we dive into the specifics of design experiments and user feedback and all that, why don't you give our listeners a brief overview of your journey in the field of design and also what led you to your current role at DesignMap?
Sure, yeah. So let's see. It's funny, we do a design map spotlight at the company where we have 25 minutes and it's a really rapid fire interview thing. So I had a little bit of practice actually describing exactly what you're after here. But I started in advertising. I went to a small advertising program way back when, and uh, and really loved certain components of that. A big piece of it was how sort of thinking about getting to the core of a problem that some brand was trying to solve had a
Mm,
real strategic component to it. And creatively coming up with ways to communicate that information to people so that they were moved to do something was such a key piece of what we were trying to do in advertising. And bringing that into what became this kind of burgeoning .com, side of the advertising business that I was a part of was something that was really attractive because the changing technology allowed for so many more opportunities, so many more avenues for communication and ways for information and meaning to be shared with the sort of end user, if you will. So that was something that was critical in my kind of early journey to move from more like print and TV and static advertising to this much more dynamic field. I love the sort of changing technology and the fact that there was so much change happening. It's something that's driven me, to today and beyond with AI coming in and sort of being this real, impetus for different ways that people experience products and how technology can help folks. So that was kind of that early phase. I moved out to the West Coast from New York in 2000 and started working for Wells Fargo, and there I was essentially working on the online banking side of things, helping make that experience as good as it can be. Worked on bill pay, launched the first version of bill pay for Wells Fargo, but there was a pace problem at these big companies like Wells Fargo and other financial institutions that was challenging and didn't always feel like you were able to execute on those great ideas and sort of really be able to make change and innovate. We did have some projects at Wells where we were working on the sort of what the future would hold. And again, that seed was planted for, oh wow, I see a better way of actually working and kind of getting larger organizations aligned around these initiatives. And so fast forward a few years during that Wells Fargo instance, actually, or that Wells Fargo experience, I met ultimately one of the founders of DesignMap. And we each had our own little journey, but then came together at DesignMap. And one of the first things we did was go back and work with Wells Fargo again on another vision of what a future of one of their products could be. And that sort of started this process for us where the power of a company having a vision that's actually manifest in some tangible way is such an incredibly important piece of gaining more alignment, getting people excited about what that future could be, having a North Star that they can work toward,
mhm.
and bringing teams together. So that's kind of like what we've crafted at DesignMap in a lot of ways.
Oh wow. So you started in print and TV,
Yeah.
advertising for print and TV, and you helped launch the first version of Bill Pay at Wells. That's really amazing. So like obviously you'd have to work with like a lot of people to get a lot of these things done. What are some key principles that guide your team in consistently delivering high quality work?
Yeah, I think that we recognize that pretty much everything we do, from the way a meeting happens to the way a deliverable is presented is all about communication and all of us learning what the next thing brings. So we're incredibly mindful of how our work sort of sends messages in every element of the work that we're doing. And that communication and that collaboration piece starts to build trust with our clients. So they bring us in oftentimes as an outsider, right? Someone who can bring a new perspective to their organization, which there's value in having that outside perspective. But we also need to very quickly build trust so they understand, well, and this just goes to sort of the changing nature of what design brings to a company, particularly some of the larger enterprise companies. They
Mm.
think, oh, it's about making something look good, right? And then oftentimes there is that that still exists out there in the world. But being able to bring a much more rounded expectation of what design is going to bring to the table is something we try to manifest in every step of the way, every sort of phase of a project, every kind of artifact, every touch point that we have with them. And so it really is about helping create alignment, being like congruent so they understand and we understand that we're both there to help each other and bring the kind of best to the table, essentially. We're oftentimes working with a point of contact or a key stakeholder who is sometimes presenting our work on our behalf, or they will ultimately be the consumer of and then have to carry that forward, right? And make that feel like there was some value that was extracted out of that, that the company kind of gains, right? We now have this new strength or new kind of capability because we worked with DesignMap and they provided us with these tools. And maybe even it's not a document, it's a way of working that we're leaving
Mm.
them with. And so it is this collaborative component, it is this alignment component, and this kind of communication piece that we're trying to kind of bring to them and develop new superpowers that they might not have had before we started working together.
Oh, nice. So speaking of learning about the next thing or learning about how to, like work collaboratively with teams and everything, I'm pretty sure you have to stay aware or just be in the know of like what's happening in the industry and trends and different things like that. So with that in mind, what are some emerging design trends or technologies that you believe will shape the future of user experience or user research or product design?
Yeah, I think the easy one is AI,
Mm.
obviously. Large language models and all of the outcomes that are coming from that are really intriguing. And it's multifaceted. There are both tools that we can leverage in our work that didn't exist a few months ago that
Mm.
we're able to take advantage of, right? To speed up certain parts of our work that are maybe more tedious, right? Or can be better because a computer can do analysis or synthesis that we couldn't do before. So that's one side of it, is like how can we leverage tools like that internally, right, for ourselves to do better work. And then the second side is how can we actually integrate those same ideas into the products that our clients are delivering to their end users in a way that's meaningful and is something that they can understand how it's working and feel confident and have that trust that this tool is something that's really interesting or that's really useful and helps them achieve the goals that they have using the product. What I think is really, there are so many interesting spectrums that I've been thinking about with regard to AI. One of them is the just the two sides of AI that everyone is wrestling with right now, the kind of massive potential and the massive concern over what these tools are bringing to the future. That one is something that people talk about quite a lot. There's the AI dilemma video presentation that's been passed around.
Mhm.
There's the AI is the new McKinsey New Yorker article. There are others, Hard Fork podcast. They've talked about this as well. So that's one piece. Then there's the the really interesting one, I think, from a user experience perspective that we're thinking about is meaning versus need. And to expand on that, there is, okay, so now we have automation for white collar work. And that's a newish thing, right, for us in a way, right? Automation came for blue collar work first. This has been
Mm.
100 plus years going on. automation is coming for white collar work. So how can we actually take advantage of that in the way that's going to provide opportunities for people to find more meaning in their work and push off the things that need to happen, right? The kind of requirements of their work into this like automation piece or even augmentation side of things, right? And so I think that that's something that we're really curious about is, say you're a physician and you need to enter in notes for every encounter you have with a patient. Part of that is necessary to do. There are compliance things, regulatory reasons for actually doing that, and also just like documenting your visit. But also, there's something meaningful about that process because it's an opportunity for you to think about the encounter more deeply, synthesize what you heard during that 15, 20 minutes you have with that patient, and then refactor what your treatment might be during that time. And so teasing those two things out is a really interesting problem to solve. And I think that so many of us have similar things in our day job that something I need to do, something I enjoy doing, and how can
Mm.
AI allow for that to be more efficient and effective?
Wow. So you've also mentioned in your bio that you have like you've worked with like a diverse list of companies, diverse range of companies, including Angie's List and Carfax. Like, how do you ensure like strategies like these, like AI and everything that's happening in the space currently? How do you ensure that these strategies or design strategies are tailored to the unique needs of each business while maintaining like that level of quality, because it's
Mhm.
sometimes you mentioned like sometimes there's no like alignment, but like how can you make sure that the quality is there?
Yeah, it's gosh, I think there's something in your question. When we think about AI, for instance, we've developed particular activities around taking steps to actually decide, is there a meaningful need for this technology? Sometimes people do come to us and say, like, oh, this is really exciting. Like, we want to try this new thing, right? And we're really excited about some new technology. And, there are often, tech first approaches that ultimately do turn out to be really valuable for people and users. But we're really just mindful of the different components of feasibility, viability, and desirability. And
Mm,
as the user experience side of that, we're really bringing in the desirability kind of viewpoint and that perspective. And so the key piece here, and Marty Kagan talks about this like risk reduction element, and I think a lot of people we think about ourselves as being able to bring in this opportunity to reduce risk that your end users want or don't want the thing that you're trying to build.
mm,
And that's ultimately what it's going to come down to. And oftentimes, you can't ask them like, hey, do you want AI added on top of this, right? As an end user, no one knows. Like that's meaningless, right? You can't like sort of start with that technology first piece, but really understanding their needs and sort of their behaviors and what drives them and motivates them, the challenges they face, right? Those sorts of things are the starting point for how we begin conversations and think about, who are we talking about, right? What is the user, the person that you're trying to solve a problem for? How can we essentially get rid of any and document assumptions that people have about what they're trying to build and start to test those assumptions and essentially reduce the risk that's associated with assuming things that aren't ultimately true.
mm. So speaking of assumptions, like how do you strike a balance between incorporating user feedback and staying true to the original thing that you had in mind, like whether it be like a way to implement like a system or a design or something. Are there any like specific strategies that you employ to make informed decisions using incorporating user feedback into these systems?
Certainly. I mean, I think that I guess, we're not asking any one individual what they think the answer is. We're really trying to look for across a body of folks, to garner a lot of feedback from a variety of sources to then combine into a path forward. It's not about sort of trying to ask three people and they each have a different answer, right? And then we're like scratching our heads. There's something that needs to happen that's maybe deeper and more underlying and broader that we can start to kind of triangulate around
Mm,
understanding. But most of the time, what we ultimately see is that there are, gosh, I don't want to call them trends, right? But like there are sort of similarities between how people engage with a product or experience something new that we're creating. And there are, similarities within a particular space. Say it's, IT administration, security, cybersecurity, right? Where there are similar problems that people have, similar expectations that people have around the products that they're engaging with. And oftentimes they have similar feedback. It might not be the same, right? But if there is a large variety of feedback, sometimes that might be a signal that we need to go back to the drawing board, right? If we're showing some concepts and we have three different concepts and it's kind of equal across the three, we do have to sort of scratch our heads a little bit to say, well, maybe we haven't hit the nail on the head with these three ideas, and some more work needs to be done to understand more deeply what people are after.
So speaking about like going back to the drawing board and
Mm.
just using the feedback to drive all of that as well, like how do you like prioritize what feedback to act upon from like the swath of information that is there? And yeah, like when you receive like like probably conflicting opinions or suggestions, whether it be like from wherever, like how do you like use this criteria to impact or change your directions, or does it hold any value?
It, of course, holds value, but I do think it has to be balanced against the larger sort of system that we're working
Mm,
within. There are always going to be trade-offs, right? There's no one perfect way to solve a problem. And it's really going to be about identifying and understanding the larger sort of system that whatever this is lives within, so that we can identify what is the best way within the system that we have, constraints that we have, and so on, where we can solve that problem. That system includes budget and time and all of the things that go into making a product and the complexity that go into making a product. But it's also worthwhile thinking about these as potentially experiments, sort of ways for learning to happen, right? We can have opinions and do some testing and understand, and then we can iterate and test again and iterate and test again. And so it really is getting to that like rapid iterative cycle that makes a lot of sense. Now, I will say that much of our work as consultants, and sort of I talked about the vision type idea a little while ago, the end result of our work is really meant to embody concepts for what the future holds. And so it's less about this iterative cycle of product development and more about what the end result intention is. And the
mm,
path to get there is kind of what you're asking about, which is, okay, how do we start small? How do we break up that North Star into a multitude of initiatives that are going to ultimately get us there? What we're creating is really the sort of alignment. You can have 10 teams working on 10 different things, but they're all under the guise of this North Star that they're ultimately working toward. And there's iteration that's going to get them there. What they end up building won't look like exactly like the thing that we made, but the intention and the concept behind it should still be there. That's really the ultimate goal. If everyone understands what those underlying concepts are and the sort of vision points for the future, and that our job is done at that point, right? We've sort of set them off on a path with all the tools they need in order to be successful. And then it's up to them to iterate to that success ultimately. None of us can predict the future, right? So 5 years from the future, who knows what's going to happen? And we're trying to set them up sort of to be most successful given what we know at the time.
mm. And getting to that point, getting to the truth iteratively requires a lot of experimentation, understanding what the truth is. So a lot of times I've kind of like come across some people who don't really understand how to define a successful experiment. Like how would you define a successful experiment? And are there any specific metrics or indicators that you can use to evaluate based on user feedback, et cetera?
Yeah, I think the definition of a successful experiment probably starts with really having a clear understanding of what your assumptions are. What do you and
Mm,
do you not know? And that experiment should really be toward guiding toward that opportunity to learn something novel, hopefully novel, right? And reduce those risks that those assumptions pose for you. I think that each project is going to have its own sort of set of assumptions that people are making going into it. And being able to start checking those off is the key. And that's really what those experiments need to revolve around, is that opportunity to say, okay, these are the big risky assumptions that we're making. Let's start to get to the answers that those are posing, or the questions that those are posing. We need answers for those. So that's kind of how I would start thinking about it. And you can almost start, like we start with kind of a workshop to identify what those assumptions are, come to some
mm,
agreement and some alignment on what those are. And then we're able to start to consider research work that might happen, other sort of activities and workshops that we can do together with our clients, to identify opportunities for testing those assumptions, essentially.
mm. Got it. Like we're gonna also talk about like how to manage like personal and your professional life. A
Hmm.
lot of people kind of have like a hard time doing that, myself included.
Yeah,
You mentioned like as well like you're your father to twin girls. That's
that's
amazing.
right.
Like how do you manage to balance your personal and professional life, and what aspects from your personal life do you bring into your professional life at
Hmm.
DesignMap?
Yeah. That's a great question. It's hard. I think, like you said, it's very difficult, especially in this day and age when, I'm sitting at home and you're easily kind of pulled in many different directions, right? I walk out to have lunch and my wife's there, and the dog's there, right? And then the kids come home and all of those things that are so easy to get distracted from, and you have to stay focused. So yeah, it is challenging. So I do go into the office the days when I feel like I really need to focus and sit in front of a computer and like not be distracted, right? And in the position that I'm in, I do a lot less, heads down work where I'm sitting in front of something and just working away at it for hours at a time. I'm much more in 30-minute meetings, checking in with people, seeing how things are going, status checks, and that sort of thing. And it's the sort of rare opportunity that I have that heads down time to think about the kind of bigger picture. But when I do, like we're redesigning the way that we structure our weeks, myself and my two partners. We're putting together, and we've thought hard about like how can we craft 5 solid days where we have, several hours every morning to kind of dedicate to focus time. And so that's something that I'm really trying to be mindful of, is managing my calendar as effectively as possible, and protecting those moments. So that's something that I think is kind of top of mind for me, that I'm really trying to do. So the second half of your question is a really interesting one. What are the things from my personal life that I bring into my professional life? There are some overlaps for sure. As a designer, you are kind of making, right? And being mindful of like what that experience is like. I do a lot of projects at home and kind of building and all that sort of thing, right? So the sort of planning and the structure of what one of those projects looks like plays a part in how we do our work as well. And I can think through, what this like craftsmanship is when I'm building a closet, for instance,
Mm,
and all of the steps that requires, and the sort of taking care of your tools, and all of those pieces are really interesting to me. And I think there's a lot of value in this tactile work that you might be doing with your hands. You kind of know when it's done. That's very different from the kind of work, abstract thought work that we do. But there's something about iterating and learning and improving that I really do. As you know, in my role, I have spent quite a lot of time developing training for our designers and thinking about kind of the areas that I like to see them push in and grow in. And I feel like I'm experiencing that in my own woodworking or project-based stuff as well. The other side of things, I'm one of the coaches on our high school mountain biking team, and so interacting with the kids, kind of, not that our designers are kids, but there's like leading a group of kids in this high risk environment where we're biking, down a hill is something that's really interesting to me as well. And just managing that experience for them is something that's almost like running a project every time we go out for practice. So.
Oh, wow, nice. So, Chuck, I ask everyone who comes on the podcast this one question, and the question is, what what what's one weakness that you've turned into your strength?
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting. I think, we do a lot of personality tests, a lot for fun, but also our leadership team has done a bunch. And I think that, if you look at some of those tests, people would be surprised that I'm in the position that I'm in. My personality, the kind of the way that I manage people is very, I wouldn't say hands off, but I let them sort of learn as much as possible, and I provide guidance in ways. I'm very much a collaborative leader, not someone who is directing as much. And I think that some people might consider that a weakness. And I think there was a period of time where I also would have kind of through, maybe concerns about my own self-esteem, been worried that that's not the right way to do it. You see other people by example who are doing it in different ways, leading in different ways. And I think that anyone looking at it by the book would say, well, that person shouldn't be in that position. But I do feel that I've been able to turn my style of leadership and the way that I interact with others into a positive. So I think that's what I would say. It's something that when I first sort of heard someone say, I've never seen anyone in a leadership role kind of test into this category in this personality test, I was kind of taken aback by that, actually, and sort of it really bugged me, actually. But as time has gone on, I feel like it's a strength, actually, in a way. It's a very
Mm.
different experience, probably for the people that work with me than they might have expected. But I'm hopeful that people view that as a strength.
I think they do. Well, Chuck, it was great having you on. I enjoyed this conversation. I'm looking forward to sharing this with our audience.
Great. Well, thanks so much. Yeah, it was a pleasure and super fun. Thanks a lot.
Awesome. And thanks for listening to the Got 10 Minutes podcast. To stay in touch, please follow us on LinkedIn or the podcast app you're listening to this on right now for more episodes. Take care.